Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week's theme of indie rock, checking out a Swedish group called Broder Daniel. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and to make sure I don't mispronounce it throughout the rest of the video, I'm going to be using the English translation of it, which is Brother Daniel. We're going to be checking out their 2003 album Cruel Town, specifically the track on it, Army of Dreamers, which sits right in the middle of the album. Let's dive into this, see what they're bringing to the table today.
We're not strange, we're just sleeping, we all just drift around. We're not trying, we are dreaming, we all blend in the crowd. Down my head turns, budding hot fire burns. Down my head it turns, in hot fire burns.
There's something very familiar about this melody, and I don't know what it is.
We're the idle people, we're the ones that make no sound, waiting in the background. Oh, life goes on without us. People come and people go. Every suburb looks the same. Street by street, house by house. Down my head turns, budding hot fire burns. Down my head it turns, in hot fire burns.
You know, it's interesting too. There's a little bit of like a southern drawl to it in places. You know what it is? I think it's the twang on the H's. There's also like a classic hard rock overall vibe, though, a bluesiness to it that's certainly pulling out those vocal elements. Yeah, I mean, that's a rather straightforward track there. We have a 2-chord progression in the verse that gets expanded to a 4-chord variant of it for our chorus. You could also view that in the opposite, where the chorus is the full progression and the verse is a stunted, smaller version of it. The rhythms that come through the vocals that sit on top of the foundation, especially during both the verse and the chorus, is very rigid, which I find interesting because the bluesiness in the song kind of gives it a little bit of a laid backness. It's certainly emphasizing all the downbeats. The vocals lean into this as well, but it's a bit more laid back than the vocals present, which are more rigid. I find that to be an interesting contradiction between, contradiction might not be the right word, but an interesting division between the musical elements and the vocal ones. The vocals are music, but whatever, the instrumental aspects and the vocal ones. And that's pretty much the song right there. Um, we do also have the expanded harmony in the chorus, but I don't think it's as strong of an element that there's much to say about. The other main thing I'm going to bring up is the guitar solo, which I thought was well done. It doesn't do anything that's mind blowing. It presents something to fill the space. It feels like a hard rock guitar solo. In fact, this entire track feels reminiscent of classic hard rock, every bit of it. I guess in the big picture, what I'm saying is that this is a rather iterative song that works. It does what it needs to do and gets out before it gets old. It just works. There is one interesting element to it though that I think might actually fill up a portion of this analysis section, and that's the production on it. And this sort of is going to bring us into our next topic here. Compositionally, this feels like a combination of classic hard rock and alternative rock, maybe. There's some elements in it that feel a bit more modern, but for the most part, I feel like it wears its influences on its sleeve. It feels older than it is. So I find it interesting, though, that that sound is then paired with the fuzzy mid to lo-fi production we would find in indie rock. The guitar here is a bit more blown out than I would expect. It's not just distorted and fuzzy, it's also too large. It's clipping on top of all of that. The vocals are a bit fuzzier than I would expect as well, also showcasing not necessarily poor production, but specifically creating the sonic profile of this song to feel like it was done without money or maybe even expertise. There's aspects about the drumming that feel a bit too pushed into the background, too hazy. The whole thing feels like it was produced by a group of people who might have enjoyed writing music and playing music, but weren't necessarily engineers. And it feels like a demo that they would have made themselves to send to a record label to say, hey, this is what we can make. Would you sign us? And then they get, an engineer to actually EQ and produce the music. And that's what it feels very raw. And so from that perspective, I'm not saying that that's how it happened. For all I know, whoever worked on it on the engineering side knew exactly what they're doing and they handcrafted this sound. And the thing is that it does feel indie rock. It has that mid-fi production to it. It isn't complete garbage production, but it isn't crisp and clean high fidelity either. It sits somewhere in the middle with sounds that are not perfectly balanced throughout the overall soundscape, but it does so with a style of music that doesn't fit the contemporary rock of the 2000s, which is sort of, to me, the blueprint of a lot of indie rock and what we've heard a lot of this week as well. A lot of these songs that we've listened to came from the late 90s, early 2000s, this one included, and so they match the compositions of the time just with a lower fidelity production to it. This doesn't. The compositional influences are different, even though the production aspirations are similar. And that gives it an interesting sound. Before I move on to my next point, I want to hit the lyrics first and see what's going on there. Because I want to get a full picture of the song before I dig into it with any sort of harshness. So let's check out lyrics first. I'm glad I did this, and I may end up doing this more in the future, whenever I have some harsher thoughts about some music in order to get some perspective on what their intentions may be. The lyrics are about being the quiet outcasts in society. He says, we're the army of dreamers, we're the idle people, we're the ones that don't count, just waiting in the background. He says, but you can't forget that we're also people. He says, we speak if we're heard, and we're bleed if we're hurt, and we seethe if we're burned. We're still people. You can't just forget that aspect about us and treat us like garbage. We're no different than you. We just aren't as loud. We don't seek the attention. Says life goes on without us, people come and go, every suburb looks the same, street by street, house by house. I don't quite know what the purpose of the song is beyond that. It simply states that we exist, we're humans, but it doesn't really. See, this is getting to a really bad position of mine. And it kind of comes down to a first stanza. It says, we're not strange, we're just sleeping, we just drift around, we're not trying, we're dreaming, we all blend in the crowd. We're the idle people. Alright, so here's the thing. There's a couple of lines in here where the syntax is a little strange for English. I wonder if this is because of the fact that it's a Swedish group, I think. Pretty sure that's accurate. Or if they were just trying to fit words in syllabically. There's one stanza that says, down my head turns, but in heart fire burns. It's kind of worded a little odd for English, but it also fits the meter and rhyme scheme presented here. So it makes me wonder, though, if there are some things that just didn't translate across properly. And I don't want to read too much into that if the song isn't necessarily advocating for zombie people, the people who just kind of go through life and do the motions and don't contribute much, they don't explore it. I mean, he says we're the idle people. We just wait in the background. Like, I suppose that's fine at the end of the day, as long as you're happy and you're not hurting anyone. I'm not going to condemn a lifestyle, but I don't see much of a point in praising it either. And I'm hoping, like I said, something was just lost in translation. He does say that we're the army of dreamers, and I think that's a really cool idea there. But the concept here, at least from what is presented in the lyrics, is that they stop at dreaming. They never go to the next stage. It's always about being idle, about not doing much. And the ending, I think, is very appropriate, though. You know, we're still human. Don't you. I suppose if you want, you can look down on us, but you know, we have thoughts, we have needs, and we still have feelings. You know, I think that's a really good message to be stated here, but I'm just not quite sure what the point of the beginning of the track is up until that final moment. It just basically says we exist, and I know we're not doing anything, but we're here. Don't be mean to us. If anyone has a different perspective on that, please let me know. But there is a mundanity about the lyrics, about simply being. We see it in the fourth stanza, life goes on without us, people come and go, every suburb looks the same. The music kind of embodies a little bit of that as well. The vocal delivery specifically, there's a rigidity to the vocal lines, there's a tight cycle to the notes, there's a heavy repetition to what the vocals are singing. The whole song is repetitive, sure, but I think the vocal loop is the tightest and the shortest and the most cyclical. It's the one we hear the most of. And it all kind of ties together, the dreariness of the atmosphere with the hyper repetition and sort of just being. There isn't really a lot of energy in the vocal delivery. It sort of just is. It feels like even the range could be his natural speaking range. And it's just sort of letting the notes come out as naturally as they can without forcing an emotion into them, without forcing pitch into them. They simply just are, much like the people that he's singing about in the lyrics. And so the harsh criticism I was going to have earlier was that the song just doesn't do anything. It is, it's fine. It checks all the marks for how to make a song. Um, and it has an atmosphere, it has a melody, it has a foundation, it has a rhythm and groove. Like, it just doesn't feel like it does anything different, though. Aside from the production thing, like I said, I find it very interesting to hear these guitar tones and vocal production paired with this composition. But aside from that, it's all well tread road. And the lyrics kind of fit alongside that. It does work in that perspective, and it makes me want to check out something else for them to see if it is a specific vibe they crafted just for this particular track to create that thematic synergy, or if it just is the way that they write. Fairly iterative, indie rock production, hard rock style music. It's an interesting direction to go. This track itself just didn't grab me, and I think that's by design now that I've read the lyrics. But I am curious, especially if there's more to this. Maybe there isn't, I don't know. I can say, though, that based off of a single listen, this is not something that would have hooked me at all, not something I would have wanted to check more out of. But I am noticing that it very strongly pales into comparison as far as plays on Spotify compared to their first three tracks, which I'm going to assume were singles. This song has 740,000 listens, while track 1 has 1.3 million, track 3 has 3.3 million, and track 2 has 23 million. That is infinitely, no, exponentially, the more popular track on this album. So while this might have been a good song for Indie Rock Week and fitting the aesthetic of indie rock, it's possible that Shoreline might be a better indicator of who this group is as a band rather than fitting them into this theme. So as usual, I try to keep an open mind with this stuff. I try my best not to judge any group or artist on just one track. But I am walking away from this one having it bounced off me a little bit and not really finding much to dig into on an analytical side either. However, those are just my thoughts on Brother Daniel's Army of Dreamers. What are yours? Give me your thoughts, perspectives, opinions. Maybe you think I'm wrong about some stuff. Maybe you just think I didn't dig into something deep enough. Let me know all that stuff in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for this one. We do have something coming out next. I haven't figured out what I'm doing for it yet. Stay tuned for that. If the intrigue has got to you, what is he gonna do? I gotta find out. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow. We're gonna have a quick theme thoughts in the morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then we'll have an album review at the usual time of 5 p.m. is when all my videos release. 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.